And today we're going to be talking about the Cell arc. Now, Cell contains quite a bit of things not really related to Cell, such as the Garlic Jr. arc. And then a lot of people think that the Androids arc and the Cell arc should be separated. I am not part of that brigade. I tend to just say seasons 4 through 6 it's just the Cell arc, the whole thing. And I normally don't really get a chance to talk about the Garlic Jr. arc at any point other than the Cell arc, because I'm not making a video just dedicated to just the Garlic Jr. arc unless I was talking about Dead Zone. And I already talked about Dead Zone, and I may have already talked about Garlic Jr. in the Dead Zone video as well, but in case I haven't, I'm talking about it now. Garlic Jr. is a very interesting point in this narrative, because it's not related, and it can't fit into the actual anime itself. Because it's like Icarus is a movie character. Icarus, the little purple dragon, was introduced in Tree of Might as a side plot. Icarus was marginally responsible for helping Gohan break out of his Uzaru mindlessness and enabling Gohan to regain his sanity when he was transformed so that he could turn his attention onto Turles. And then Icarus returned for the 4th movie, which was Lord Slug. Icarus returned again in the 5th movie, which was Cooler's Revenge, and then he disappeared. He did not show up again, ever again. However, if I were to do meticulous timeline searching and grinding for time release dates for each individual episode of the anime and the movies, the original Japanese release dates, that is, to find a good spot for Garlic Jr.'s arc, it would be in between or right after Cooler's Revenge. Which means it would be in that Icarus arc in the movies, where Icarus was a character and was actually a thing. I've said this many times. Even though there's no definitive proof, somebody could ask someone who was actually on the animation team or director. I don't know if Koyama was doing the movies around Cooler's Revenge period, but somebody could always ask him this question. If anybody ever wanted to learn Japanese, to ask him this question, if Koyama still takes interviews or anything like that. Who knows, you may get an answer at some point in the history, or maybe there's an answer to this question already in existence somewhere in the archives on the Most Excellent Kansenshu website. I haven't found it. So this is just my theory, is that the Garlic Jr. arc was originally meant to be a movie. It was meant to be a sequel to Dead Zone. Before they ever made a sequel for Cooler, called Cooler Returns, they were going to do a sequel to Dead Zone. I don't know why they were ever going to make a sequel to Dead Zone, but it seemed like the easiest one to make a movie to, especially considering they were planning to make Gohan the main character for this arc. Because Gohan was the one who did the final blow to Garlic Jr., who knocked him into the Dead Zone. So it would make sense for Gohan to be the main nemesis for Garlic Jr. if he ever happened to return. Piccolo would also be involved, Kami would be involved. It would be a great story. And I think the Garlic Jr. arc would have made a great 2-part special, about 50 minutes. It would make a good special. There's enough material there if you condense the entire Garlic Jr. arc into 50-55 minutes of footage. We would be able to get rid of all of the reused animation. We'd only keep the good animation. We'd only keep the good script, the good stuff, and unique moments and the unique stuff, yada yada yada. It would be a decent little story. And it would probably have been one of the maybe mid to lower mid-tier movies in the movie lineup. That's my theory of what this Garlic Jr. script was originally going to be. That's my theory. And that's what their plan was. Until they got to this part of the story and realized that they were within 10 episodes of 10 chapters of the manga. So if they continued at this pace, where each episode of the anime was like one chapter of the manga, maybe a couple filler episodes here and there, they would still ultimately catch up once a big fight-heavy sequence started to happen, and the android's arc was coming up to one of those fight-heavy sequences, such as Goku's encounter with the androids, and then Vegeta turning Super Saiyan fighting the androids. It was a lot of fight-heavy sequences with the android's arc, which all happens in Season 4 of the anime. And only the second half is Season 4. All that fighting is in Season 4. To compare how much of that story was going on here, let's see. To compare, the androids encounter is pretty much all of volume 13 of the manga, the US Viz release, obviously, and a good chunk of volume 14, which is actually volume 30, 29, and 30. They'll tell you the real arcs bits in the actual picture itself instead of the American Viz releases. Even then, both of these is a good chunk fighting. Both of these novels, all these chapters, most of it is just fighting or talking about fighting or commentating about fighting before flying off to do more fighting. So you would have, and all of this, pretty much, is just the second half of Season 4. The first half, the first 10 to 15 episodes, the Trunks bits, all of the Trunks bits are in Volume 12 here, and then there's a couple filler episodes like the driving episode and all of that stuff. That's all taken cover in this. So the first 10 or so episodes is Garlic Jr., and then the next 8 or so episodes is Future Trunks' bits and the filler bits and that. Because the ending of Season 4 ends around the time that Android 18 absolutely pummels Vegeta and leaves everybody pummeled on the floor. Then Piccolo flies off to Kami's, and he wants to fuse with Kami, and then Kami says, wait, I want to see what's going on, and we get to hint that Cell's out there. That's when Season 4 ends. That's a lot of content, but just those handful of episodes, like 10 or so episodes, is like 20 or so chapters. That's what they were worried about. They were worried that they would get to another fight-heavy sequence being so close in the manga chapters-wise that they would have to pull a Frieza again, where each episode was a chapter, maybe even each episode was half of a chapter, which means they would have to come up with 15 minutes of filler footage each episode. So they had to do something. They were very freaked with how close they were to the manga, that they had to do something. So Garlic Jr. was a sign of desperation to fill out time. Get 10 episodes, technically just 8 episodes for Garlic Jr., with 2 episodes bookending it with Marin's story. So they had to figure out how to extend it, get to stall for time, so that the manga could get 10 more chapters ahead. By the time they finally get Future Trunks introduced, they would be well into the android's arc. So by the end of 10 episodes, the manga would be well within finishing Volume 13's worth of chapters. So basically, let's go look through here on this side here, all these chapters. They'd probably be closer to the ending bits here rather than to the starting bits. So by the time they actually began the arc, they'd be well within the story. And that was the plan. And that's why Garlic Jr. has been placed where it is. And why the story doesn't really work at all anime-wise, because it features characters that never showed up in the anime prior, such as Icarus. Which means if you ever wanted to know who Icarus was, you had to have seen Tree of Might at the very least to know who Icarus is and how Gohan was introduced to the dragon, because Gohan was never introduced to Icarus in the anime. He never introduced himself to Icarus. He never met Icarus. There's never an arc or mini arc about this adapted into the anime. It was only in the movie. Now, the way these movies were released in Japan, most people would have seen Tree of Might. Dragon Ball fans would have seen Tree of Might before they actually got to see the Garlic Jr. arc and see Icarus in there. So they'd be fine. What about us over here in the States? Well, they did show Tree of Might. The first 3 movies were adapted in the original Pioneer/Ocean Group dub. So they showed the Tree of Might partway in the middle of Season 2 when showing the Ocean Group dub. So people got to see Tree of Might. So people knew at least they got to get introduced to Icarus if you were part of the Ocean Group generation. Now, if you were part of the Toonami Faithful generation who missed out on Ocean Group, so probably you're like in the early 2000s, you didn't watch this in the 90s, then you might have missed out on Tree of Might. So by the time we finally get around to the Androids arc and we see Garlic Jr., you'd be wondering who the heck is Garlic Jr. because you probably didn't watch Dead Zone. You'd be wondering who the heck Icarus is because you didn't watch Tree of Might. Movie characters introduced in the anime, never before seen before, we're wondering what the heck's going on, right? It's a mess. This was meant to be a movie. That's my theory. It's what I'm sticking with. It's meant to be a movie. Now, that's what I treat it as. I do. I treat it as an overly bloated movie and not part of the actual anime. But I have to talk about it because it's actually in the anime. And I am talking about it in this portion because it's in this bulk of arcs that comprise the Cell arc, which is Seasons 4, 5, and 6. I'm only showing Season 5 because that's the one that Cell's on. The Season 6 cover has Gohan, and the Season 4 cover has Future Trunks. I wanted to show the one with Cell because that's the one that's the name of the arc. It's the Cell arc, so we have Cell in the picture. Either way, I finally got Garlic Jr. out of the way, but what are my thoughts on it? You know, I am usually apologetic towards Garlic Jr. I really am. I think the Garlic Jr. arc isn't that bad. If you condensed it into a 50-minute special, it would be a pretty decent movie. I loved the Dead Zone. I have it on tape. I watched it all the time. I rewound the tape and watched it again and again. Sometimes I would watch that thing 3 to 4 times in a single day when I was a kid. I did that the day I got that tape. I watched it 3 or 4 times in a single day. It was a fun movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought Kami had a very interesting role. And after watching OG Dragon Ball, after reading OG Dragon Ball and learning who Kami was in the early parts of the King Piccolo into the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament arcs and the role of Kami there, seeing Kami return in the first Dragon Ball movie in a pretty big role was also fun to see. I appreciated the heck out of that movie. And so a sequel to that movie, which is probably, if we consider the first 4 movies, Dead Zone would be my favorite of the first 4, followed by The World's Strongest, followed by maybe Tree of Might, then Lord Slug. Yeah, it's diminishing returns, but the 5th movie, Cooler Returns, I would say, is better than Tree of Might and Lord Slug. It's not better than the first 2 movies, though. But that era, with the Icarus arc, with Tree of Might, Lord Slug, and Cooler's Revenge, this one would be making it 4 movies in the Icarus arc, the subplot arc with that. And it's a fun little story. We don't see Icarus again after this. After this, we may see Icarus one more time, I think in the driving episode. He shows up in a filler segment, but that's it. We don't see him again unless you're listening to the English dub, and you get to Season 7. Goten meets the tiny purple dragon in part of the filler bits while Gohan's trying to train for the tournament, and Goten says, "This little guy reminds me of Icarus." And that's a one-note line. We don't actually see Icarus, we just see it said in a line. I think that's the last time we ever hear of him. So Icarus is a movie character. This is a movie made into an anime arc to save time out of desperation. They didn't have time to actually come up with a series of 10 episodes. They just used something they already had and adapted it. That's all they could do. So maybe they already they adapted Marin into this. Maybe they didn't have Marin actually in this. So maybe that was the one thing that they did within this frantic period, this chaotic period. So maybe that's all they had to go on. Either way, I'm finally finished talking about Garlic Jr. It's a decent little thing. There's a lot of reused animation. It's pretty bad. Some of the fighting is pretty good. Whenever Piccolo is fighting Garlic Jr., it's pretty good. But he doesn't fight Garlic Jr. for too long, so they don't have pretty good fighting segments. And that's one thing that I noticed with this entire arc in general, is that the fighting... When I watched this as a kid, I thought the fighting looked amazing. When I watched it now, I start to realize just how good the fighting was in earlier arcs. In fact, one of the pinnacles of this series, fighting-wise, is still Yamcha versus Tien of the 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament, something that was filmed in the 80s, that was made for a montage for an insert song to be put in, which is Wolf Hurricane. It was a fantastically animated sequence, a fantastically animated fight. And then another really good one was Goku versus Vegeta, when Goku uses Kaioken times 3. It was a fantastic sequence. The animation was top tier. It was a fantastic little segment. But now, things are kind of getting a little lazy with the fighting. They often show two characters going together, just going, and they don't really have too many frames. They just show, oh, they're doing really, they're going, ooh, fast. And we don't actually really see smooth animation frames for movement. We just see really fast. If you were to pause the actual scene and skip forward frame by frame, it would be frantic. It would look like this. Beep, 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 beep. There was no actual sequence of movement that was actually really good until really late in the arc, in the season 6, when we finally get to the perfect Cell bits, where we finally see Goku versus Cell. That fight was pretty well animated. And that's the one reason why, is because of Studio Sagasha. That's one of the newer studios that they started to pick up to start animating some of the episodes in the later parts of the Cell arc, and they were fantastic in all the fighting bits. The fighting bits, the facial features, the camera pans and angles, it's all fantastic. The eyes look so good during this portion of the story. It is fantastic. Studio Sagasha, I had to look up a lot of this stuff. I really did, because a lot of these animation studios are, there's not too many things about them unless I have to learn Japanese and look for it in Japanese. Maybe I'll be able to find it on Japanese internet. But I can't read Japanese, I can't type Japanese, so I'd have to use a translator, translate English to Japanese, and then paste that Japanese into a search bar to find the Japanese website, and then translate all of the search results into English, click any articles or whatever about Studio Sagasha, translate. That's a little bit too much, too much more than what I'm willing to do. But either way, Studio Sagasha is fantastic. The fighting Goku versus Cell is probably the best fight in this entire portion, this entire arc. Now, going through what I normally do, let's look through each volume to show off the vehicles. We have Roshi on a little motorcycle bike, which I absolutely love. I absolutely adore this. This is a fantastic little thing there. And on the back, we just see Goku with his Frieza arc, because the first two chapters of Volume 12 is still Frieza. Volume 13 is another vehicle bit. Piccolo on the back with Gohan riding a little butter car. That's a little fun. I want to see more of this, you know. Maybe in the manga especially, I would love to see just little moments like this, where they just have characters driving a car, talk about this, having some calm little things. This is a Volkswagen VW, look at that. So, Toriyama loves his vehicles, he loves drawing vehicles, and, you know, maybe we should have let him have some time to let his characters breathe and have calm moments like this, because these are easy to animate, to bloat it out and have longer conversations and all that stuff. Maybe he could have done a little bit more of that. And that's a basic Goku Super Saiyan charging forward bit. Volume 14 has no vehicles, but Volume 14 has a very anniversary, whatever, number 30 thank you little bit here. They've made it to 30 volumes. It's a big milestone. Look at that little artist there. And this is the drawings for everybody. Trunks has a little darker purple hair there. I like Trunks with the purple hair. I don't like him with blue hair. That's one reason why I don't think I'm ever going to... Excuse me. Well, I don't think I'm ever going to actually watch the Dragon Ball Super anime in its full entirety. I'll watch some of the fights. The fights are pretty good. But I don't like blue-haired Trunks. I don't like that present Trunks grows up and his purple hair just turns blue. I don't care for this. And ironically, it's because Bulma's hair was originally purple, which is why they made Trunks' hair purple. But then they made Bulma's hair blue by mistake because Toriyama wasn't consistent with Bulma's hair a lot of the times in the earlier portions, so they chose blue for Bulma's hair. And then he started doing more purple in the manga, but they already made her hair blue, so they continued with blue. And then he introduces Trunks with purple hair, so they introduced Trunks with purple hair in the anime as well. And that's fine. The original Z arc to show Bulma with blue hair, Trunks with purple, that's fine. Yeah, I don't have any problems with that at all. I don't see why they felt like they had to course correct and just say, oh, if Bulma's hair is blue, we have to make Trunks' hair blue in Dragon Ball Super. That's dumb. I don't care for that at all. Either way, I love this little spread here. This is fantastic. I love these little fan arts, or even just regular professional arts that look like fan arts. Just let him draw. Let him have fun with his characters. Let him draw some stuff like this. This is him having fun with his characters. I love this. I love looking at it. That's a nice little classic spread there, looking at the androids just standing around like that. That's fantastic. And here's a story with Volume 15. Volume 15 was actually the very first volume of the manga that I ever picked up. Because when I was a stupid kid, the very first Dragon Ball Z singles on DVD that I ever owned was this. The Imperfect Cell 17's End arc. The first episode of this DVD shows Piccolo versus 17 after the Hell Zone grenade attack. And I thought it was fantastic. I really thought it was fantastic. So look, these are what I mean by the old singles here. Now, I could talk about some of the dub changes too with singles, so let's go ahead and get that out of the way. The singles have, if I remember correctly, the original dub from the cable, from TV's cable and all that stuff. It has the Faulkner score and all of that good stuff, right? These original singles came with a lot of unaltered dubs. And this is where I heard, like what I mentioned with the Frieza arc, Vegeta in his original dub voice by Sabat earlier when he was trying to sound more like Brian Drummond, rather than how Vegeta normally sounds. He went back in for the Orange Brick releases to redub his lines in his more modern Vegeta voice so that it would sound more like his later Vegeta voice. And I do appreciate that, I really do, but that gave me a sort of like a Mandela effect, or is that the right word? I don't know. But when I started to watch that portion of the story again and heard Vegeta saying lines that were different from what I remember him saying, because I had older Frieza Saga singles on tape, that I heard him say different things in a different sounding voice. So I was like, wait, that doesn't sound right. Is that? So it had me look it up. And there's some more dub changes in the collections here versus the singles releases. Not necessarily the specific singles, I'm just showing a single that I have on hand. But in particular, the Mr. Satan portions of the story in the Cell Games section. In the cable release, and I believe also the singles releases, they call him Hercule. Hercule, everybody just says Hercule, 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 Hercule. They don't even say Mr. Satan once. Not even once. So they just say Hercule, the crowd's all screaming Hercule, Hercule, and all that good stuff, right? We remember this, we see it in the video games and all that good stuff, right? Well, in the new collection releases here, I want to say as far back as the Orange Brick releases, because that's what these Blu-ray collections are based off of. I want to say that they redubbed all of the Mr. Satan lines. They dubbed over all of the Hercule stuff and replaced it with Mr. Satan. They brought back in all the unaltered signs to have them say Mr. Satan instead of Hercule. They undid all of their things that they wanted to friendlyify for broadcast television. And I want to say they were also on the singles releases. And that's a reason why you want to collect the singles, is because there are a lot of dub changes in the later releases that you get to see the unaltered versions of. Now, there are two scores of the English version on these collections, which is the English dub with the Kikuchi, the original Kikuchi soundtrack score, which I ended up watching. I just had to. It's just the superior music tracks for the entire anime. There are some tracks that I do love for the Faulkner score. For example, when Vegeta does his Final Flash, I would say that that portion of the story is better in the Faulkner score. It just gives it a more cinematic, atmospheric, awesome, dramatic moment. Whereas in the Kikuchi moment, when Vegeta is powering up for his Final Flash, it's all silent. There's no Kikuchi score playing. He's just charging up his attack. And then when he fires it, there's some jingle in there, but it's not super dramatic. It's not the best moment. I remember it in the Faulkner one far more iconically, and that's a moment I would definitely say that the Faulkner score goes leaps and bounds ahead of Kikuchi. There are points where Faulkner really does better, but I love the Kikuchi score. I have a newfound respect for the Kikuchi score. After having binged all of the Frieza arc and the Saiyan arc with the Kikuchi score, I decided to binge the entire Cell arc with the Kikuchi score as well. And there's some differences, though. There are some differences even with the Kikuchi track. For example, in the final season, when Gohan transforms into Super Saiyan 2, they do not bring in Day of Fate by Hironobu Kageyama. They do not add that in, even for the Kikuchi score for the English track. They do not add that in. So you have to change the dub track, the vocal track, to Japanese, original Japanese. And that's the only way you'll be able to hear Day of Fate when Gohan transforms. Otherwise, you'll just have to look up the song. And that's probably why nobody ever heard of Day of Fate until, I want to say, DBZA, Dragon Ball Z Abridged and all that stuff. Maybe the bigger mega fans would know about it because they watched this show in Japanese. They collected all the stuff. They maybe imported the Japanese dub tapes with English subtitles, probably from Hawaii and all that stuff. There's a lot of ways that the big mega fans of this series got to see this in original Japanese with English subtitles. There were ways people did this in the 90s to watch this entire franchise before everybody else. So I'm not talking about those mega fans. I'm talking about the Toonami faithful. I'm talking about the regular Ocean Group people into the Toonami faithful. If you were the Toonami faithful generation and you were not crazy on the internet importing VHS tapes from Hawaii and all of that stuff, you probably only ever heard the Faulkner score for this while you were growing up. So you never even heard of Day of Fate. Maybe you never even went back and collected these over the years until 2016, 2017, when Day of Fate finally got re-released unofficially with the English version of it for DBZA Team 4 Star's release. That was probably many people's first introduction to that, which is unfortunate because it's a very good song. It really is. Hironobu Kageyama's music is fantastic. You can go back and listen to so much of that. His music throughout the 80s and the 90s is so good. Even in the 2000s and the 2010s, Hironobu Kageyama continued to make Dragon Ball music. As far into Raging Blast 2, Kageyama did Battle of Omega for Raging Blast 2, which is a pretty fun one, but I would say that his more earlier stuff from the 80s and 90s are far better than this. And it's particularly during this time where there were a lot of image songs. What are image songs? Well, I can't exactly show pictures of image songs, but basically they had a lot of DBZ CDs made during this period of the anime, during this highlight of popularity for Dragon Ball in Japan. There were a lot of CDs, audio CDs, where a lot of singers like Hironobu Kageyama and some other artists such as Kuko, that is Kuko, And I think Yuka, I think that's the correct way to pronounce it. Yuka. I think that's her name. But there are a lot of people, a lot of names out there that I couldn't really find too much information about them, other than Hironobu, because everybody knows Hironobu Kageyama. He did a lot of the Image songs. He did a lot of them. But there were a lot of songs made during this period that I ended up listening to, quite a bit of them. Most of them are available on YouTube to look up. A couple of them I can list off the top of my head that you can go look up right now. So I'm going to list just one of them, though, so you can look it up, and you'll be able to find all the rest by proxy through finding this one, because you'll be able to find the album cover, and then you can look through everything else on that album cover. Go to your YouTube search bar and just type in DBZ Hits. E, that's the letter E, Na, that's just N-A, and E, okay? DBZ Hits, E, Na, E, though that may look like backwards threes, but that's just how I write my E's. But, so you go E, letter E, capital Na, N-A, E, space, Na, space, E. Just type that in and press enter. And you will find the DBZ hit song, E, Na, E. Which is, obviously, all these songs are going to be in Japanese. Obviously, they're not going to be in English. Sorry about that. But you're going to hear it all in Japanese. If you're a big fan of this it's good. It's been pretty popularized in the 2020s and the late 2010s. It's called City Pop. And that's basically 80s and 90s Japanese music, pop music, and soft rock music, and all that stuff. There's a lot of great stuff out there. I've been obsessed with it for a while now. It's very easy listening. It really is. If you're a big fan of Rick Astley and stuff like that, then you'll probably be a big fan of City Pop. But basically, you could go look up this type of music and listen to it. If you're a big fan of City Pop, this sounds a lot like it, because it was made during that period of time. So a lot of this qualifies for City Pop, And it's a pretty fun music. These are like image songs or things like that, where they grab an image of it, like just a still image, maybe from the anime or just something like this, and they make a song just about the image. And it was a pretty good time to listen to a lot of these songs. So I liked it. I did. I liked a lot of it. I ended up downloading quite a few of these, because they're fun songs. I like listening to them, and I've been listening to them for over a decade and a half now. They're very good songs. And I know I'm going out of order, because that's just how I break these down. I just go out of order and things I just think about off the top of my head. Like, for example, I have here that I wanted to talk about the Game Boy Advance games. I brought out all three of them. I'll be talking about the Boo's Fury one when I get to the Boo's Saga, so we don't have to worry about that one there. And I didn't talk about the Legacy of Goku 1, even though it covers the Saiyan Saga and the Frieza Saga. Obviously, Legacy of Goku 1 doesn't really have too much deep story stuff. It's just the first prototype to all this stuff. This series didn't really get good until Legacy of Goku 2, but Legacy of Goku 2 is great. It is fantastic. The Faulkner score, the best of the Faulkner score, gets remastered by these two people called Yanis Brown and Paul Carmody. They ended up going through all of the Faulkner score for the Cell arc and recomposing it for this game. So all the background music you'll be hearing while playing through this is all from the anime. It's all Faulkner music. Then they just made it, they extended certain bits, they looped a couple things to make certain tracks that were maybe 30 seconds longer, now to 3 minutes. There's a lot of great stuff in here. I would arguably say that even though this doesn't have any of the Faulkner music in it, this has its own different track. I love the music in the Legacy of Goku 1, especially. I love the whole three of the music in this, but this one's not based on Faulkner. This one's based off Faulkner, this one's based off Faulkner, this one is not. But listening to this, there's a lot of great tracks on here as well. I'm not going to get another chance to really talk about this unless I just decide to later on, who knows, but I'm going to talk about it right now. There are some great music in here. One of the highlights that I want to bring up is when you go into the Namekian Temple. It's a dungeon area in this when you get to the Frieza portion, right before you could fight the Ginyu Force. In the Namekian Temple, the music that plays in there, you could go look this up again on YouTube and do whatever you want there. Just type in Legacy of Goku Namekian temple theme. Just type that in and you'll probably find it. Click it. It's great music. It sounds like elevator music. It's very smooth. It's very jazzy. I love it. I do. I love it. Now, when we talk about Legacy Goku 2, I can make a video dedicated to this, but this is all just based off Cell Saga stuff, so I'm just going to just bring it up here, talk about it here. This covers the anime and a lot of the filler. There's a lot of great filler in this series, in this portion. Some of my favorite filler episodes come from the Cell arc. Like, the driving episode's a great one. It's a little overrated, but it's still very fun. It's very funny. There's another great one during the 10 days for the Cell games. They made a couple of filler episodes there that really reminded me of OG Dragon Ball. It's probably because around this portion, they knew at this point in the Cell arc that Goku was going to die. They knew the manga was probably already showing Goku dying at this point, or the plan was for Goku to die at this point. So they decided to make filler episodes to really celebrate the early portion of OG Dragon Ball. Gohan ends up visiting this little village, and he meets this old martial arts master grandpa dude who probably would recognize Goku. He probably was a dude that recognized Goku when Goku was a kid, you know? And it was a nice little callback, and even Tao Pai Pai, Cyborg Tao, shows up in 2 episodes in this bit, the 10 days filler bits. And first Tao meets Gohan and says, "Oh, you look like Goku." And then Gohan says, "I'm his son." The Tao freaks out and flies away. He runs away in fear, and that's a great little episode. Another episode is when Goku's collecting the Dragon Balls so that they can use the wish to bring back everybody Cell killed. He ends up meeting Tao again, and Tao realizes that there ain't no way Tao's beating Goku. So he tries to outsmart Goku and gives him 3 little puzzle rings and says, if you fail to solve this puzzle, then we get to keep our Dragon Balls, and we get to get your Dragon Balls. And if you succeed in solving these puzzle rings, then we will give you our Dragon Balls. And no questions asked. And Goku says, "Alright, I'll do it." As silly as Goku is, he ends up doing it, and he does succeed in the puzzle rings. So Tao just hands him the Dragon Balls, because Tao knows if he tries to fight him for him, he will lose. And it was a nice little segment, and that Tao shows up in here, although he actually is somebody you could fight in this. You could fight Tao as a boss during the collection of the 7 Dragon Balls, where that's the only part where Goku's playable. It's just funny. Goku is playable during the collection of the 7 Dragon Balls and the first fight with Cell, and after that he's gone. And even though Goku does have a pretty decent bit, the collection of the Dragon Balls is a pretty huge chunk of this game. I love this bit, honestly. I love this whole story. The 5 playable characters are Gohan, Piccolo, Vegeta, Future Trunks, and Goku, the big 5. The big 5 of this arc. And it's a pretty good story, it's pretty good music, and it covers almost the entirety of the anime, including filler bits. It pulls dialogue directly off the English dub of the anime and puts it directly into text boxes. It's a great time. It is a really great time. It's probably the best of the trilogy, in my opinion. It's just a fun time all around. And, well, let's continue with our little anime bits here. Well, the manga bits here with the vehicles. We have another vehicle here. They're driving the 13. That's the 31 car here. Nice little car there. It's just Cell on the back. And then we move on. This is the one that I wanted to talk about here. This is one of those covers that really, their hair is the same. And that's probably why they made Trunks' hair blue in the manga, in the anime. And also in Toyotaro's manga as well. They made his hair blue. Is so because in covers like this, their hair is the same color. So if Bulma's hair is any color, even if it's miscolored to be blue, Trunks' hair has to match his mother's hair. It just has to, right? So they made his hair match there. This is kind of like a purplish blue in this cover, though. And Trunks' hair here is like a little purplish blue. I like this color. I think this is the best color for his hair. This one's a little more like a magenta-ish little color. You can see how it's a little bit darker there. Do we have any more color versions of Future Trunks that I can look through? No. This is the only one. So this is the only 2 covers in color that I could find. There were a bunch of chapters that were colored, But these are just all in the black and white versions, so I can't show you those. But you can look them up if you want to. Look up the color versions of other chapters to see how Toriyama inked in Trunks' hair, what color he chose, to see if it's more this bluish purple, or this more magenta, or his typical purple that we see in the anime. You can check it out if you want. I'm not going to go do that. And let's take a look at the back. Look, nice color there, a little good spread there. This one doesn't have any vehicles. The back, there's no vehicles. It's just a typical one. But let's talk about this one, though. In the back here, in the final chapter, even though it didn't release in this specific order, in the back, they just added this into the back of Volume 17. We have here Trunks the Story, which released roughly around the time the movie, the special, The History of Trunks came out, which I do also have. I have the original release of History of Trunks, which contains the background music that there's Dream Theater music in there. I love Dream Theater. But that was my first introduction to Dream Theater music, was through the History of Trunks special. It's a fantastic movie. I've watched it, rewatched it, rewatched it, rewatched that movie so many times. It's such a great story. I like it more than most of the DBZ movies. And I treat it as part of the movies, even though it's not part of the movies. It's a special, right? And it's the only one that really has a chapter that Toriyama ended up adapting, even though I want to say, let me look in the back here and see if he actually did do it. No, he didn't. Not in this one, but in the Japanese release, like in the Shonen Jump magazine, when Trunks the Story was introduced, at the end of that special chapter, Toriyama has a little bit with his little mini avatar, Toribot, talking about, go watch the special that will be releasing soon, or whatever. So it's kind of, so you get to think about, maybe he did this little special as to promote the actual animated special that was coming out. So maybe he was adapting off of that. Maybe it was an adaptation of the anime thing, and rather than the anime adapting off of that. So it's whatever. The movie, the special is very much superior to the manga special, because the manga is like, what, 11 pages just highlighting. It's just highlighting it. There's nothing new, there's nothing unique in that. Everything in the movie is so much better. And then, of course, we have two more here. We have Volume 18, Goku on a Bike. I love that one. That's a really good one. There's nothing there. And then we have this one, Goodbye. Goku saying goodbye. This is the arc where this is the volume where he dies after all. So that's obviously the choice of picture that they picked here. And, of course, we're going to go through the rest of them in order again to see any chapter title cards and see if there's any more vehicles on that, because that's what I started to do at the very beginning of this little breakdown history thing. So I'm going to keep that up. I'm going to keep that little bit up to see if we can find any chapters with vehicles in them and see if there are any in here. No, none for Volume 12. Let's look through the back of Volume 13 to see if there's any here. There generally are some here and there, but not a lot. Let's see, we got, here's one. We got a little vehicle here with a Bulma with her poofy hair riding whatever this is. This is the number 13 car here. It's a pretty fun one. Anything else? What else do we have here? Young Falls. No. No. Okay. Let's look at Volume 14. See if we have anything in the back here. This one doesn't really have too much of anything in the back here. We get to see that these two here, and we get to see them on a vehicle here. Another motorcycle. He was in some sort of motorcycle mood this era. There's a lot of pictures with them on motorcycles. I like that one. That's a pretty fun one. And then nothing else in that one. Now let's take a look at Volume 15. Oh, and I almost got distracted here. This was the first volume that I picked up, Volume 15. Mainly because Piccolo vs. 17, which is on this single here, this was my first single that I picked up on DVD, and I ended up watching this a lot more than the singles that I had on tape. And so, although I had the single right before this one, the one in the Imperfect Cell arc where Piccolo ends up fighting Android 17 with his Hellzone grenade. That episode's on the previous single, and then that fight continues on this DVD with that single, with this single, and so this entire portion from those two singles that I keep mentioning, this one and the one right before it, is in Volume 15. Pretty much the most of the story in that is in Volume 15. Because Volume 15 ends with Tien's Kikoho Barrage. The end of this the end of this single is also concluded with Tien's Kikoho Barrage. Let's take a look through the bulk of this here. It pretty much is about here. Up to about here. All of this in Volume 16, which is basically right after Piccolo encounters Cell and Cell escapes. All of this leading up to Tien's Kikoho Barrage, which starts roughly right here. Tien Kikoho, do you get all that? That was all on these two singles that I watched, and I loved this portion of the story. I really did. So this was the first manga volume I picked up, just so I can actually read the manga version of this sequence, which ended up being my favorite sequence, and it's also the most read sequence in the story, because I ended up rereading this a bunch of times. And then the next one I picked up was this volume, which is Volume 16, so I ended up reading both of these sequences so many times, until I ended up picking up Volume 17, then Volume 18, then Volume 14, I ended up moving out of order, obviously, but this is a big nostalgic one. This is one of my favorite portions of the story as a kid. It's not the best when you look through the anime again, and now that I'm older, but it's still a part that's very, very close to my heart. This chapter bit talks about the androids here a little bit. It gives you a little background on the story. I love that Toriyama included this. It's a very good thing, and I love that they actually translated this chapter title card into English, so that we can read this and learn about this and all that good stuff. Any more vehicles do we have? Any more? Oh! Let's look at Volume 16. Look through the back of 16, see if we have any more chapter title cards. Any good chapter title cards and vehicles. We have look through the back here. We get to see some stuff here and there. Vegeta's Final Flash, pretty good one there. I love this little joke here. Toriyama actually loved the design for Imperfect Cell. He actually did. He loved this design, but his editor said he looked ugly. So this was the chapter title card he made for right before he became perfect. Is that he was talking about, he's lamenting that he's gonna lose his pretty face. Oh man. No, but I love that he makes those little pinches there, jabs at his editors. No more vehicles. Alright, let's look through Volume 17, see if there are any vehicles. I already spy one of them. I spy one of them here. Look through here. The next page we have Gohan and Goku on a vehicle here. It's just a little typical little wheels. It's got some wheels, it's not a hover one. I think this is the one that Goku's driving when they check the radio and see the Cell versus the Army. That's the chapter title card's name, Cell versus the Army. We got anything else? No more vehicles on that one. No, there's only two more left. You're getting a little bored. I'm interested in these. I like looking through these and checking out Toriyama's vehicles, because you get to see just how much more detail Toriyama tends to put into his vehicles. He puts a lot of detail into every single tiny little intricate piece and intricate little mechanical whatever, and you end up realizing that he puts far more detail into these vehicles that he often puts into his characters. So you can see, he likes the vehicles more than his characters. And that's actually ended up true. That's actually the truth. Let's look through the final one, Volume 19. There is nothing here. There's nothing. Look, you get a couple title cards here, and that's it. There's no more vehicles. Sad to say, but that's it. And, of course, when we look through here, the full bit here for the Androids arc is 8 novels. Part of Volume 12, like I mentioned in my Frieza arc breakdown, is dedicated to the final bits of Frieza. So from the final bits of Frieza, so that's about so it was technically about 7.5, and that's basically about as much in the previous arc. It's about 7.5 volumes for Frieza. So let me break that down. Let me have that sink in for you. Is that 3 volumes of the anime, which is season 4, 5, and 6, is the Cell arc, and the Frieza arc is only seasons 2 and 3. So let that sink in. Is that both portions, right? Both series of episodes. There's about maybe 10 to 15 more episodes in this than there are. Because, obviously, in Season 4, we have the first 7 episodes being for Garlic Jr., but the next 20 or so episodes has Future Trunks and the Androids bit. So we have 20, 30, and 30, right? So maybe about 70-ish episodes for the Cell bits. And we have about 60 to 65 episodes for Frieza. And this covers the same amount of material in more episodes. So we get to spread it out a little bit more. And that's probably something that the animation team deliberately intended to do, so that they would not make the same mistake and catch up to the manga again. They wanted to spread it out. They have a couple filler episodes here and there. There's a lot of really good filler in this. I really like the Tao Pai Pai episodes. I like the driving episode. There's a couple dumb ones, but there's not a lot that I thought were truly heinous and irritating. But there is one dubbing episode in the Garlic Jr. bit where Roshi tells Marin. There's another piece of filler during the Androids arc, which is the part of the Androids, Season 4, second half. Marin returns to Kame House looking for Krillin while Krillin's out doing the Android stuff. And Roshi ends up telling Marin the story about the Dragon Balls and the Red Ribbon Army. And in the English dub, this is probably the first time most of the Toonami faithful were hearing about the Red Ribbon Army arc. So this was their opportunity to flash back to all this stuff, and they got a lot of his details wrong, terribly wrong. They called Tao Pai Pai General Tao Pai Pai, and they said that Tao was part of the Red Ribbon Army. This is completely incorrect, factually incorrect. So when I swapped into the Japanese dub, Japanese language with English subtitles, so sub versus dub, when I swapped to the sub version, we get to see Roshi explain the actual story, and with more factual stuff here. He doesn't say that Tao was part of the Red Ribbon Army. He was hired by Commander Red. And I like looking through that and seeing all of the dialogue changes. There's way too many to talk about all of them, but I'm just talking about this one mainly because it really stuck out to me. This filler bit was really bad in English. It's really bad. Because I hate when they get this bit wrong and say that Tao was part of the Red Ribbon Army. He was a general. No, he was not. He was more like a mercenary. He was an assassin. In the OG Dragon Ball, he was a mercenary for the English version, right? Because I guess they just didn't want to say assassin. Oh, that's such a bad word for kids. Whatever. But that's one of them. Either way. The Cell arc, I would say, has a lot of problems, but it's also the most nostalgic arc for me, and I can understand why a lot of people love this portion of the story. After all, this was the portion of the story where I picked up the most singles for, and this was my first single that I picked up on DVD, so it ended up being the one that I ended up watching the most. After I stopped watching VHS and I stopped having access to all of my singles on tape, this was the one I continued to watch on DVD. I had a couple more on DVD, but this is the one I watched the absolute most out of all of them. This portion of the story is very nostalgic for me. But I would admit that animation-wise, animation ability-wise. Outside of the Studio Segasha bits for the Cell games, most of these fights, even the parts from my favorite part of the story that I'm most nostalgic for, it's just not as good as I remember. It's not as good as Goku versus Vegeta with the Kaioken. It's not as good as Tien versus Yamcha for the 22nd. The animation, the fighting, the movements, when they're slower, we get to see the movement a lot easier. We get to see them animate the attacks a lot better. It just looks a lot better when they're moving a little bit slowly. When they're doing all that together, it gets tiring because everybody's doing it. When everybody fights, everybody just does that. Vegeta versus Cell, Trunks versus Cell, Gohan versus Cell, Piccolo versus 17, Vegeta versus 18, Goku versus 19. It gets tiresome when you do the exact same thing. I want to see the actual animations. I want to see the actual movements. I want to see people move without the together. And it's lazy. It is. And they continue to do this into the Boo Saga, but we'll get to that later. This is getting a little bit longer. I would say in the manga version, the Cell arc is so much better. The manga version is better paced. It has a lot of good stuff here. But the Cell arc's filler is probably my favorite in the entire franchise outside of OG Dragon Ball filler. The filler in this has some of my favorite stuff, if you don't count Garlic Jr. It has some of my favorite filler episodes that I would not take out for the world. There is an episode during the 10 days for the Cell games where Gohan has a birthday, and they just celebrate Gohan's birthday. They just have a moment to breathe and calm down, and they just celebrate Gohan's birthday. It's a calm episode. They get to reminisce about when Gohan was born, and Goku and Chi-Chi pick out a name for him. And Grandpa Ox King, he mentions Gohan, Grandpa Gohan, his old training partner, and whenever he says the word Gohan, baby Gohan laughs at the name. He's also happy about the name, and so they both decide to name him Gohan. It's just a sweet little episode. It's just a very good, powerful episode that builds on the story, builds on the character dynamics for everybody, and those are the examples of what I would say make for great filler. It's the stuff that expands on the story, expands on the characters, it fits in where very well. It just gives you time to breathe with these characters. These types of small moments like this with Gohan's birthday, it just really makes you hit you in the feels. It does. It hits you in the feels. And when Gohan finally transforms into the Super Saiyan 2 with the Day of Fate playing in the Japanese sub version, it is cathartic. It is so moving emotional-wise. I would say that even though I have the most nostalgia for the Cell arc, and I think the Saiyan Saga is far superior to this, anime-wise, I don't care. The Cell arc is probably my favorite of Z era. It's better than Boo to me, it's better than Frieza, and even though the animation in the Saiyan Saga is superior to this, I have the most nostalgia for the Cell arc. I do. And I could rewatch the Cell arc and recapture those moments from my childhood stronger than I could any other portion of this story, with the exception of the Boo arc, which I also watched with the Toonami faithful right after Cell. It's just, I don't have as strong of a tie to this because I didn't have as many of the Boo arc on tape or DVD. I did have the Ultimate Gohan fight with Super Boo on tape. I did have that, and I really enjoyed those. I watched those a lot. I think I picked those up at a dollar store or something, you know. It was a very good time to watch those. But outside of that, the Ultimate Gohan bit, I didn't have any other Boo Saga tapes. I did have the 10 years later after the Kid Buu fight on singles. I'll get to talk about that and tell those stories later. But either way, this was a very nice rewatch of the Cell arc. And a lot of these episodes I a couple of them I missed when during the Toonami Faithful era, because I had only watched this like one time anime wise, outside of the ones I had on singles that I watched a bunch of times. A lot of these I only saw one time when they were aired on cable, and sometimes I was outside during that day and I missed the episode and I never saw it. So seeing a couple of these episodes for the very first time really puts things into perspective for you. And I've already told this story about Toriyama's editors and how the villains showed up here and how this is such a mismatch and a prime example of riding at the seat of your pants. Where Toriyama's very first design for the androids, 19 and 20, or 19 and Dr. Gero, were his original designs for the androids from Trunks' future. Those were his original designs. He never intended for 17 and 18 to be the twins. He never intended that at all. The original first two androids were the androids. It was because of his previous editor, Kazuhiko Torishima, who called him up on the phone and said, "This is just a geezer and a fatso." And so he created 17 and 18. Torishima calls him up again and says, "What? These are just a bunch of punks." And so Toriyama brings in Cell. It's an example of using editors from both current era and his previous era to keep Toriyama on his toes writing-wise. We would not have gotten Cell if it weren't for Kazuhiko Torishima. And then, of course, for his current editor, the current editor, once he created Cell, said, "Transform him, have him transform." And he created this, and then say, "Have him transform again, do it quickly, this guy's ugly." Even though Toriyama really loved the design for Imperfect Cell, I actually really love the design for Imperfect Cell too. And so he created Perfect Cell's design, with all the spots and all that stuff. Manga-wise, you could tell that he doesn't like having his assistants ink in all these spots. He doesn't like drawing all the spots. When we look at Cell for this, let's take a look and find an image of Cell here. Here's an image here. The spots are not inked in for Perfect Cell. But for, let's say, semi-perfect Cell, let's see how the spots are inked in for semi-perfect Cell. And they're inked in for imperfect Cell as well. But once he gets to here, the spots are lighter anime-wise, but on manga-wise, they're not even inked in at all. He's just trying to cut corners and save time, right? There's a lot of things that I learned about with the Cell arc, manga-wise, anime-wise, with the little studios like Studio Sagasha coming in. There's a lot of background material that I learned about, that I was interested in learning about and researching. Not just for this breakdown, but I knew about all of this stuff years ago, simply because I was fascinated with this property. I was fascinated with this topic that it was worth talking about. It's worth me looking and learning all this stuff up. I looked on Kansenshuu, I watched a bunch of breakdown videos. This is a very special period in the anime for me. And I think the manga is the superior form. I love the filler in this, and I would watch the filler of this. I would never watch the Kai version of the Cell arc. I have to watch the original with all the filler intact. I have to see Gohan's birthday. I have to see Tao Pai Pai return. I have to see all of that. I have to see the driving episode. I have to see all of that. It's just part of Dragon Ball Z to me. It is. Now, Kai introduced a new generation to Dragon Ball Z, which is great. I was part of the Toonami Faithful generation. I watched the filler episodes when they aired on cable TV. I loved them. I watched the filler episodes on a lot of the singles that I picked up. I loved them. I did. I didn't care. I loved all of them. I even picked up the Garlic Jr. arc. They came in 3 singles. I picked up the Garlic Jr. arc and I watched those simply because I was a fan of the Dead Zone, which I had on tape, and I watched that a bunch of times. Well, I would say the Dead Zone movie is far superior to the Garlic Jr. Returns arc, obviously. Oh, and I have to talk about Tien and Yamcha. We have to talk about Tien and Yamcha. I'm not going to get another chance to talk about Tien and Yamcha. I may talk about Yamcha for the Buu Saga. I may save Yamcha for that, because he does have a line in the Buu Saga that goes against his character so strongly that makes me very angry. But Tien, this is the Tien part of this episode, part of my Tien rant. Tien surprised me in this arc. I forgot how involved he was in the Cell arc. Out of the three humans, Tien, Yamcha, and Krillin, I would say that Tien was the most involved combat-wise. Krillin was the most involved story-wise. He had a lot of story stuff. He had stuff with 18. He flew with Trunks into Jiro's basement and blew up the lab. He had a lot of story stuff. But Tien had a lot of combat involved. He charged into the androids, even though he knew he couldn't win. He flew in with Piccolo to help Trunks when Trunks went in to save Vegeta against Android 18. He flew in to help Piccolo on the island against the androids. He watched from afar to see Perfect Cell show up. He saw him absorb Android 17, and Tien knew that he was not able to defeat Cell. He knew he had to try. And that's part of his character that I was surprised to see how intact it was until it wasn't. After his Kikoho barrage against Semi-Perfect Cell, Tien's character takes a severe nosedive. Before that, though, it is very on point for him. Tien is a training buff. He does nothing but train, and he had his goal of, catching up to Goku. That was his goal ever since he met Goku, is to keep training to fight Goku again and defeat him fair and square instead of having it be a draw. And so he lost to Goku in the 23rd, but even then, Tien said, you know what, I'm going to keep training. I'm going to fight you again, Goku. And that was on par to his character. This guy is a martial artist. He has pride of a martial artist. He will train to keep fighting and surpassing the opponents even if they're light years ahead of him. And that is why he challenged Cell. Even though he knew he wouldn't win, he challenged it because of the pride of the martial artist that Tien had. Yamcha was a bit of afraid. He was afraid. He got involved, but he didn't train with anybody seriously. He just trained in a gym or whatever. He just did his own thing, which is very disappointing. The death of his character happened here because Toriyama needed to get Yamcha out of the way so that he could create Trunks. Yamcha was with Bulma at the time, and he had to get him out of the way so that Vegeta can move in on Yamcha's territory and create Trunks, because Bulma is a character that had an available womb, and he already wrote Launch out of the story. I would be actually surprised if Vegeta and Launch ever got together. If he kept Launch around, Launch would probably be the person that Vegeta would have gotten with. Can you imagine Vegeta and blonde Launch? That would be incredible. That would be insane. That would be awesome. It would be a great thing to see for an alternative history, Vegeta and Launch. But that didn't happen. He wrote the excuse is that Yamcha cheated on Bulma. That's why they broke up. Because he had to kill Yamcha's character so that Vegeta could move in, because otherwise it would make Bulma look very terrible. When ironically, Bulma being the one who strayed fits with her character far more than Yamcha's cheating fits his character. Because you see, in OG Dragon Ball and in the Frieza arc, whenever Bulma has a fight with Yamcha, she is prone to wandering. When Bulma has a fight with Yamcha because girls found Yamcha attractive, Yamcha's still afraid of women. Bulma's like the only person he's able to talk to, so he might be fumbling with his words trying to get away from all these fangirls of his because he's just a very attractive looking dude. Bulma was very jealous of this and upset that women found him attractive. She didn't like this, and they had a fight. And then Bulma flies off with Goku for a Dragon Ball hunt for the General Blue portion of the story. And she finds General Blue attractive, and she starts flirting with him until General Blue snuffs her off because he's not interested in girls like that, right? And so it just gives you a prime example as to Bulma's character and who would be prone to wandering. Again, when Yamcha is dead and Bulma's out in space to try to bring everybody back to life, When Zarbon shows up, he's a pretty boy as well, and Bulma starts flirting with him until he turns into beast mode. And, again, Bulma prone to wandering, which is very recent compared to the Red Ribbon Army arc, but both arcs are connected to the Cell arc. Cell has Frieza's cells, and this is all about the Red Ribbon Army arc. Both arcs have Bulma wandering when she's supposed to be with Yamcha. And yet Toriyama made Yamcha the one prone to wandering. This is character assassination. After doing this to Yamcha, he does nothing else for this arc. All he does is get attacked and defeated by Gero. Gero punches him in the chest, and that's it. That's all for Yamcha's character. He has nothing else to do in this arc. Outside of just being there physically, right? He flies Goku home when he gets hit with a heart virus and all that stuff. He's there, but he doesn't really do anything. Tien fares a lot better. He does. And I think it's because Tien is still a popular character. He was very popular in the 22nd arc. He's very popular during the King Piccolo arc. Even though Toriyama keeps fumbling with Tien and fumbling with things to do with him, people still like this character. They do. I love this character. He's one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. And I was surprised when Tien did what he did. When Tien did his Kikoho Barrage, when I watched that as a kid, I hadn't seen OG Dragon Ball at that point when I first watched this, and I thought, wow, this guy is awesome. This guy is awesome. And they didn't make too many action figures of him. I always wanted a Tien action figure. I never got one. That's very sad, disappointing. But one day I might get one. One day, I don't know. But right after this, one of his coolest moments in this entire franchise is when his character takes a nosedive. When Tien is on the lookout, when the room of spirited time is being passed around, and Vegeta and Trunks go, and then Goku and Gohan going, and then Piccolo sees that Vegeta lets Cell become perfect, and Piccolo says, maybe I should take a turn in the spirited time room, time chamber, hyperbolic time chamber, all this stuff. Piccolo says, maybe I should take a turn in there. And then Piccolo offers Tien a turn in the room of spirited time as well. And Tien declines. He declines. I'm sorry. No. It's not in Tien's character to decline a chance to train, to get stronger. It's just not in his character. This is so against his character that it's like you're writing for a completely different person, but the signs were already there. Right after the fight with the androids, when Tien flew in with Piccolo and got beat up, Tien had no idea about Kami and Piccolo being one in body, despite Kami being the one to tell Tien to kill him during the 23rd tournament when Goku and Piccolo were fighting. Kami says to Tien, kill me. If I die, Piccolo dies as well. And Tien was about to do it before Goku said to Tien to not do it because he planned to defeat Piccolo. Tien should know all about all of this stuff. He should. And yet, in the manga and in the anime, Tien is completely clueless about Piccolo and Kami being one in body. It's poor writing. It's very weak writing to make Tien the dummy so that he could be the audience character in case the audience forgot over the few years between the 23rd tournament and now that Piccolo and Kami were one in body at one point, even though in the Cell Saga this story was already shown. We already learned about their connection there in both the Saiyan and Frieza arcs. We've been learning about their connection, their life link, for years. And yet they made Tien the audience character, dummy guy, so that we could re-explain Piccolo and Kami fusing together, because that's what Toriyama planned to do. I think you could have kept that a complete secret. You could have said, oh, Piccolo's flying off, yada yada yada, and Krillin says, don't worry about it. And they don't explain the Kami and Piccolo fusion at all. We just get to see it. Show, don't tell. Piccolo flies up to Kami and he talks about fusing, and that's when we learn about their fusion link and the power-up and all of that stuff. We flash back to Guru talking about it and all that stuff. That would have been fun. But this comes at a complete killing of Tien's character. He's not this dumb. He is very intelligent. He was probably more intelligent than Krillin and Yamcha combined. This guy is a martial arts genius. He is a martial arts master. He would have gone into the Room of Spirit and Time probably both days if he was given both days an opportunity to go in for both days. I doubt he would ever really become relevant. I doubt he would even reach Piccolo's tier, and Piccolo was the weakest of the big five. I doubt he would even reach Piccolo's level. But I would probably argue that if Tien went into the Room of Spirit and Time for 2 days, he'd probably come out near Namek Goku's Super Saiyan levels of power. I would argue he would probably come out in that level of power. And I would probably argue that his Kikoho would be able to do to Perfect Cell what it did to Semi-Perfect Cell, which is absolutely nothing, but it would be able to pin him in place for a couple times. And I would argue that that would be a good move to use when everybody came flying in to help Gohan out against Cell. That would have been a great little moment right there, right? To show everybody his training things. Tien with the Kiko, Piccolo with his big stuff as well. But this is where Tien falls. Tien has his final moment of relevancy versus Semi-Perfect Cell. That's his final moment. That's it for him. He comes back for one bit in the Buu Saga, and that's it. He's gone. Until Dragon Ball Super, which brings him back, but arguably all of his showings in Dragon Ball Super are very disappointing. But at least I'm glad he's there. He's showing up for the barbecues now. You know, he should have probably showed up for some of those. You know, he's friends with Yamcha and Krillin, and he just says, "Oh, we won't see each other again, ever again," because Toriyama wants to write him out of the story because he can't think of anything to do with him anymore. It's disappointing. It really is. But Toriyama doesn't really work well with bloated cast. He needs a small cast to work well with. That's why he keeps condensing the cast and splitting people up, because he works better when he's got like 2 to 3 people rather than 15 people standing together and all this stuff. It's inevitable when he writes too many characters. He has to throw a couple into the background. So this is Tien and Yamcha's turn to be thrown into the background, forever forgotten. But I'm glad that Tien had this moment to really do one last thing, to really make a difference. I was surprised. I didn't think he would have as many moments to really show off his character written properly. Outside of that one moment after the androids when he plays a dumb about Piccolo and Kami, he does have a lot of moments where he's written a little bit consistently. He says he wants to help out. He says he wants to be part of the moment. He says he wants to be part of the team, part of the fighting. He needs to get in there. He needs to help Piccolo. He needs to do a lot of stuff. He wants to take action. He doesn't want to... He needs to take action. He needs to do... He needs to get in there, right? He needs to get in there and do, right? He's a doer. And that makes sense for his character. But after declining for the Room with Spirit Time, that's it for him. And it's understandable. It's just sad how it happened. But yeah, that's my final rant on Tien. I thought I'd be a little bit angrier, but I'm just acceptant. I'm just accepting it. That's it for the Cell arc. That's it. It's a very long video. I know it's feature length, but it's a pretty long and big story to tell, really. It's a good arc. It's a good anime arc. It's very nostalgic for me. We only have one more after this, and that's the Buu Saga. And then we have the movies. Still have more of the movies to talk about, Lord Slug and all that stuff. So we're not done with Dragon Ball yet. Still got more of the video games to talk about, but that's it for the Cell arc.